Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to another bathrobe satsang. More like uh, a bathrobe recovering from fake satsangs. I don't give satsang. I'm not enlightened. If only Neo-Advaita teachers could admit that, then I wouldn't be here. So I'm actually kind of glad. I'm kind of glad. Meaning, I'm starting to see how Neo-Advaita serves a function, how everything serves a function, uh, even the uh, even the horrible things that happen. In the Vedic scriptures, Vedic meaning the traditions of India, there's a beautiful verse where God says, "I am the truth, I am I am the true doctrine, I am the false doctrine, and I am the overcoming of the false doctrine," which is very deep, very, very deep if you think about it. But it points to a really wild idea that untruth and overcoming untruth is a divine process. And boy, has that been made very real for me in my process of recovering from Neo-Advaita. I have to say it's been one of the most enlightening things that's ever happened to me. It was one of the most painful things that ever happened to me. But this process of disentangling myself from Neo-Advaita, and I've used the metaphor of a web very often. Neo-Advaita is a very sticky web. And, what I'm really sitting with is people go down the Neo-Advaita hole in different levels. Like I went pretty far down the hole, but I've met people who went even further down the hole. And then some people kind of go medium down the hole and get a little stuck, but their life and their personality, their self doesn't get completely mangled. And there's some people who kind of dip in and start to not feel good. And I've talked to people at all different levels. Of impact. And then some people will do Neo-Advaita their whole life and only have a slightly negative impact. I don't understand. I have theories why that is. I think one of the big things is what I've noticed is people who approach Neo-Advaita with deep emotional suffering, trauma, they're the ones, and that includes me, who go very far down the rabbit hole. The more unbalanced a person is when they show up at a Neo-Advaita satsang, the more harm, the more harm they can receive. That's my model. That's my opinion. But the other thing, what's really on my mind and heart, that's all just like a long introduction. Sorry. What's really on my mind and heart this morning is just, as someone who went very far down the hole and someone who approached Neo-Advaita with intense suffering, intense, you could say imbalance, emotional imbalance and problems, like existential problems. Like Neo-Advaita took me very far down into dysfunction. And so the process of coming out it's not easy. It's not simple. It's not linear. About a year ago, maybe 9 months ago, I got to the point where I was that Neo-Advaita could never hook me in again. So that's like one stage of the process where there's just a complete rejection of Neo-Advaita, because it's one thing to be like, oh, Neo-Advaita is wrong, but it's another thing to like really disentangle oneself from it. And because Neo-Advaita is out there, it's growing, and then Neo-Advaita ideas are creeping into all sorts of other spiritual practices and traditions. And so there's kind of all sorts of temptations to go back into some of the insane dissociative philosophy. So that was a big milestone for me of like, no, I am absolutely done with Neo-Advaita. And I've shared about that. It was that phase for me was literally about 4.5 years to get to that point of, nope, Neo-Advaita is bullshit. Like with all my being, because it's one thing to be like, Neo-Advaita is bullshit, but to be like 100% clear and solid in that, it took me a while. It took me about 5 years. But I was doing it on my own. And so my hope is that this channel and other resources can help people, along a little more quickly. That's part of why I do this. Then that was not easy. But then comes the really hard part, is rebuilding oneself, making a decision, like saying yes to life, and yes to emotional healing, and yes to facing all the things I was running from through Neo-Advaita, because Neo-Advaita is just an addiction. It's just a form of escapism. And that's the phase I'm in right now, and it's not easy. It's not easy, I'm not going to lie. But it is rich, and it is meaningful. And what I've come to realize for myself, as someone who went pretty far down, is that it takes a very profound solution. For a while, I've been trying to do all these different kind of like self-help things and positive things, to fix myself and heal myself. And all those things are good and virtuous, but they don't really get at the root. And the root is, and again, I'm going to speak for myself, a spiritual longing that Neo-Advaita partially satisfied, but it satisfied it in a really negative, painful way, a way that had very negative consequences. And so there's the spiritual longing, and then there's the stuff that blocks the spiritual longing. In my case, unresolved trauma, fear, resentment, all the things. Oh, hey, Marion, I'll get to your comment in a moment. Just saw it. There's all the things that block us from the divine, from higher power, from truth. And for those of us who went really far down, it takes a radical solution. And so what I'm exploring now for myself is the path of surrender. Surrender to higher power, to truth, to life, to God, however you want to language it. And the way I'm doing that is through the 12 steps. The original version of the 12 steps. The modern 12-step movement is very different than the original path. But it's very interesting because the 12 steps are about recovery from addiction. And I've become convinced that Neo-Advaita is an addiction. So I'm very curious to see how the path of surrender helps in my journey from recovery from Neo-Advaita. And Marion wrote, "Hi, good to see you live. Great, always good to see you, Marion. I can't do magical thinking anymore and feel so free I can't describe it. Glad you're continuing to heal. For me now, all spirituality is escapism. Zen's so useful." Cool. If you want to share what you mean by magical thinking, I have an idea. But if you want to share a couple examples of magical thinking, and that's amazing that you feel free. All spirituality is escapism. We need to define spirituality, but I'm kind of with you, is that most things that are called spiritual are a kind of escapism. I hear you. I think some things that are called spiritual aren't, but we need to define that word. But first, I'm curious to hear more what you mean by magical thinking. I'm so glad that Zen has been an amazing resource for you. Well, I'll let you say what you mean by magical thinking first. I want to have a few things to say on my own. Actually, I will. So Neo-Advaita is based in magical thinking. Some of the magical thinking is, if I just inquire, that'll fix everything. And so two things. That leads to people just doing self-inquiry, but it also creates a kind of dissociative high, like, oh my God, I found the answer to everything. Just that belief creates a dissociative high, because it's taken life, which is a very complex and challenging and painful phenomena, and be like, I've got the solution to life now. And that in and of itself will create a kind of dissociation. So let's see. Okay, so for you, Marion, magical thinking is kind of, oh wow, okay. I mean, I don't know what to say to that. Vedanta, Buddhism, Advaita, Vedanta, higher power, reincarnation, rebirth. Don't expect anyone else to agree. Just my experience. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know quite what to say to that. Maybe I'll... I mean, that's amazing that's working for you. In terms of, recovery from Neo-Advaita, yeah, I don't know that I have much to say to that. But so, in terms of magical thinking and Neo-Advaita, like, that's one of the things, is like just practice self-inquiry. That's the solution to life. It's very magical thinking. And so many times I would go to satsang, Neo-Advaita satsang, and I would leave just feeling so good, because I'd be like, oh, this is the answer to everything. And it wasn't. But the belief that it's the answer to everything, the belief that just practicing self-inquiry will solve everything, it would just make me undescribably happy. It was a false belief. It's kind of like believing, like, I don't have to go to work anymore. I don't have to show up at work anymore because, like, $1 million check is coming my way. Like, that's would create such a sense of happiness and joy, but it'd be untrue, So in the same way, Neo-Advaita creates this false happiness based on false expectations. So Marion wrote, there's just this moment and nothing else for me now. I mean, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And so for anyone else here on this channel, what I would say is, please don't adopt the approach, please don't adopt the approach that Marion is speaking of. There's just this moment and nothing else for me, not because it's not true or not because it's not valid, but because what she's talking about is a stage on the path. And so, I mean, so what's happening right now is so important. So Marion's been on her path, and I don't know all the details. I get little bits here and there. And now she's at the point where she's not interested in any belief, such as Vedanta, Buddhism, Advaita Vedanta, higher power, reincarnation, rebirth. So she doesn't want to even think about those, and she considers all those things magical thinking. So that's the place that there's just the present moment for her. That's the place she's gotten to right here, right now on her path. And so let me see how to say this. And according to Buddhist teachings, it's a completely valid place and approach and stance, but it's not the stance to start with. And that's not what she's teaching, but that's kind of how Neo-Advaita teaches, actually, is like reject all this other stuff and just inquire, or just be in the moment and just let go and forget everything else. And it's very dangerous, and it doesn't work. Wherein Marion is part of a tradition. She's been practicing for a while, and now she's at this particular place, which, I mean, this is actually beautiful that this is happening right here, right now. Thank you for sharing all this, Marion. But for someone to just come on the live and just read some of the things that she wrote and be like, okay, well, I'm done with reincarnation. I'm done with higher power. I'm done with Buddhism. I'm just going to be here now. That would be a really harmful teaching. I'm going to assume, because she's part of a legitimate tradition, like that's the perfect teaching for her, and not just teaching, perfect approach for her right now, being part of a tradition, having a teacher, and then having practice for a while. For someone who's not properly prepared and not in the same place, that teaching of, and again, she's not teaching, she's just sharing, that idea of all these things are magical thinking, reincarnation, rebirth, Buddhism, I'm done with all that. I'm just going to be here now. For another person, what she's doing would actually be very dangerous and harmful. And that would be me. Like, for me to let go of all beliefs and just try to be here now, like that would wreck me. And so this is no criticism of you, Marion. I hope you can hear what I'm saying. But this is the essence of the real spiritual path. It's a process with different people in different places that have different needs, and those needs can change over time. That's why you need an actual, valid, skilled teacher who can keep an eye on where the person is, and the path will then modify over time. Whereas Neo-Advaita is just this formula of like, just inquire. That's all you need. I'm just catching up on some of the thing. And so Marion's saying, I'm not saying that the beliefs are wrong, just that she doesn't need them anymore. Exactly. Yeah. Everyone should just be where they are. No, this is perfect. I don't even have words for how perfect this is. It's like you've progressed on a path in a valid tradition, I believe, I'm assuming, with a teacher, and this is the place where you are now. Because true spirituality is not a formula. It's a very individualized process requiring skilled one-on-one guidance. Yeah, so it's beautiful. So, welcome. We've got 3 live viewers. I think I'm about to wrap up, but if anyone else has any comments, let me see if I have anything else. Actually, this I'll be curious to hear your response to this, Marion. So I have a friend she's not a formal teacher, but she's in a leadership position in a Zen monastery. And she described the Zen path, at least there's different versions of Zen, like this, that the mind and beliefs and views, in Buddhist view, are considered a prison. And so the goal is to find freedom from the prison. And paradoxically, you need views to get out of the prison. So Marion has gotten to the place where she doesn't need views anymore. Like, that's amazing. And until you get to that place, you need views. You need opinions. You need things to help guide you out of the prison. And so the Neo-Advaita teaching is like, let go of the mind, or give up all your views, or give up all your opinions. That teaching is valid at a certain point, the point where Marion is at. Before that point in time, that teaching is actually harmful, devastatingly harmful. In the Buddhist view, and again, in the Zen tradition my friend's a part of, and the Buddha himself taught, you start with right view, and then when the time is right, you let go of all views. But it's just considered essential. So the thing that the Buddha said was essential, and in the Zen tradition my friend is in, like, you need these things for the spiritual path. Neo-Advaita is like, oh, get rid of them. You don't need those. And hence, there are train wrecks occurring. All right, beautiful souls. I think I'm going to wrap there. Thank you so much, Marion. That was really interesting. I wish everyone a beautiful, beautiful day. And it's early morning here. I'm going to go meditate a little more. Take care, beautiful souls. Thank you much.